In 1962, Edie Adams was America's golden girl. 2 months later, IRS agents raided her home and took everything. They wanted $520,000 for debts that weren't even hers. Her husband, Ernie Kovacs, had just died in a car crash, and now the government was treating her like a criminal. She hid cash in the walls, worked 18-hour days, made $5,000 a week, but kept only $200. What happened next shocked Hollywood. By the time she was done fighting, she'd lost more than money. She'd lost something far darker. Edie was born in the spring of 1927 in a small Pennsylvania town where coal dust hung in the air, and the weight of tradition was thicker than smoke. Her father, Sheldon, didn't just dislike show business, he saw it as something indecent, something that would stain his daughter's future. But Ada, her mother, quietly defied him. She heard something in Edie's voice, something that shimmered even when the lights were out. By the time Edie was 5, Ada had enrolled her in piano and voice lessons without her husband's knowledge. Money was tight, painfully so, and the family bounced from one place to another. Shavertown, Grove City, Trucksville. Like they were chasing a version of stability they could never catch. When they ended up in New York during the Depression, things got worse. Yet even then, Ada kept slipping her daughter toward the stage, while Sheldon kept slamming the door shut. But Edie was relentless. By the time she was 7, she stood in front of a radio microphone in Kingston and sang the Star-Spangled Banner. The station paid her $25. In today's money, over $400. Her father couldn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. But Edie had already tasted what it felt like to be heard. In New York, she began inventing excuses, fake study groups, fictional school projects, while secretly attending auditions. Ada would sometimes drive her, their bond growing in the silence between lies. Those small radio gigs helped pay bills. They were surviving on songs and secrets. But eventually, secrets don't stay buried. The day her father found out, everything cracked wide open. At 18, Edie auditioned for Juilliard. Sheldon thought she was applying to traditional colleges. She let him believe that. She even listed a fashion school as her backup just to keep the illusion alive. When she got into Juilliard, she told him it was for classical music, which technically wasn't a lie, but her dreams were growing too fast for rules. While still a student, she joined Alfred Kinsey's controversial study on female sexuality. In conservative America, this was scandal, plain and simple. Edie didn't care. She started teaching part-time at Barbizon School of Modeling. Her commissions hit $200 a month, enough to buy her freedom. She gave motivational assemblies at New Jersey high schools and realized that performances, not lectures, paid more. Her hidden life was no longer just rebellion. It was strategy. In September of 1950, she stepped onto a televised stage as Edie Adams and sang an operatic ballad that left judges stunned. She won the Miss U.S. television pageant, beating out a dozen other women. 13 million people watched her on live TV. The $1,000 prize, worth over $12,000 today, went straight to opera training. Her win landed her a spot on Milton Berle's Texaco Star Theater. Suddenly, she was everywhere. But back home, her family still argued whether this was real success or just something shameful in a pretty dress. Then came the accident. She was 19, rushing from Juilliard to a hidden audition when the crash happened. Hospitalized with injuries that nearly stole her voice, Edie faced the possibility that everything she'd worked for might vanish. Her parents divorced during her recovery. She was left picking up the emotional pieces while trying to stand on her own. The money dried up, so she doubled down. Riskier gigs, longer hours, bigger stakes. Her career didn't take off, It exploded, lit by the fuse of desperation. By 1952, she stood on a Broadway stage in Wonderful Town. Behind the curtain, she was a wreck, vomiting every night from stage fright, keeping a bucket in the dressing room. But she pushed through, note after note, performance after performance. She made $200 a week, not much by Broadway standards, but enough to earn her the Theatre World Award. Everyone applauded her voice. No one saw her panic. She wondered if the applause was ever meant for her at all. Then came Miss Adelaide in Guys and Dolls. She performed the same role over 200 times. $350 a week. 8 shows every week. Still vomiting before curtain call. The tight corsets cut into her ribs. Her sleep dropped to 3 hours a night. She dropped 15 pounds and picked up chronic insomnia. The stage lights were bright, but behind them, Edie was fading. When she landed a role in Call Me Madam opposite Ethel Merman, things only got worse. Merman made sure of it. She refused to let Edie share dressing spaces, humiliated her in front of the cast, even locked her out once just to prove who was boss. During one show, Merman physically threw a drunk man out of the theater mid-song and then kept singing like nothing had happened. That was the atmosphere. Perform or perish. Edie called it survival training. At 26, after winning another Theatre World Award, Edie was offered a $1,500 weekly salary. In today's money, that's about $17,000 a week. Hollywood came calling with $50,000 contracts. She turned them all down. She couldn't afford to lose control. Rehearsals ran 18 hours. She survived on caffeine pills and vitamin injections. Her hair started falling out. She wore wigs without anyone knowing. The price of fame wasn't just high, it was hidden. Then came Silk Stockings in 1955, Cole Porter's last Broadway musical. Edie played a Russian dancer, high-kicking in 4-inch heels. She had a sprained ankle but kept dancing, cortisone shots twice a week, 12 costume changes per show, 8-minute dance routines. She lost another dozen pounds, surviving on black coffee and aspirin. Porter rewrote songs just for her voice. The ankle never healed. Arthritis set in and stayed with her for life. But every night, she smiled through the pain. It wasn't courage. It was compulsion. Her television debut came earlier than most realized. In 1951, she auditioned for Ernie Kovacs' local show. She only knew 3 popular songs, sang them all, and was hired on the spot. Kovacs himself didn't even choose her. His producer did. But the chemistry was instant. She soon appeared on Your Show of Shows with Sid Caesar, mastering comedy sketches that poked fun at the absurdities of everyday life. Those performances weren't just fun, they were reputation builders. By 1954, Edie became a regular on The Ernie Kovacs Show, helping anchor its chaotic sketches like The Nairobi Trio. The timing of those sketches was so precise, even veteran dancers struggled. Celebrities lined up to perform in the gorilla masks. There were no monitors, no playback. They didn't even know what made the audience laugh until weeks later. In 1963, she starred in her own show, Here's Edie. It ran on ABC, alternating time slots with Sid Caesar's program. Her guest list included Zsa Zsa Gabor, Bob Hope, Buddy Hackett, and Terry Thomas. She should have felt unstoppable, but TV was ruthless. The show was canceled after its first run, despite the star power. Between 1954 and 1956, Edie appeared on The Tonight Show over 20 times. This was before Johnny Carson, when the show was still finding itself. She sang, she joked, she showed up night after night, shaping the early language of late-night TV. Kovacs even hosted the show briefly during this period. Edie's presence was no coincidence. It started quietly in a Philadelphia studio in 1951, when a 24-year-old Edie Adams stepped in for an audition. She'd just been seen on Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, and now she was face-to-face with the producers of 3 to Get Ready. With a classically trained voice, but only 3 pop songs in her pocket, she gave it everything. She later joked that if they had asked for a 4th, she never would have made it. But 3 was enough. Watching her was Ernie Kovacs, 32, brash, recently separated, and instantly captivated. She looked like Marilyn Monroe with a Juilliard certificate. During a live sketch, they shared an unrehearsed kiss that wasn't in the script, and suddenly everyone watching could feel the heat. Kovacs was still married, but the chemistry was undeniable. The press smelled blood, and the gossip columns lit up with scandal. Once Kovacs' divorce was final, he didn't wait. He sent a mariachi band backstage during one of Edie's Broadway shows. Then came a diamond ring, with instructions to wear it until she made up her mind. Edie wasn't sure. She took a 6-week cruise to Europe to think. 3 days in, after a flood of transatlantic calls, she turned the ship around. On September 12, 1954, they eloped in Mexico City. The officiant was former New York Mayor William O'Dwyer, and the vows were in Spanish. Neither understood a word and had to be nudged to say sí. The headlines exploded. They called her a homewrecker. Kovacs' ex-wife Bet wasn't quiet, especially with 2 daughters in the mix. Edie stepped into stepmotherhood mid-firestorm. While the tabloids fought over the scandal, the couple became a sensation on screen. 3 to Get Ready aired live and unrehearsed across the Delaware Valley. Kovacs read ads while being hit with pies. Edie sang through a rain of flying objects. Once, a prop gun misfired inches from her face. They didn't flinch. They turned every disaster into a punchline. Viewers couldn't get enough. Kovacs made sure everyone on set was fed like royalty, even ordering in from Chasen's. But with 8 to 14-hour shoot days, the chaos was real. Their daughter Mia was born on June 20, 1959. Edie barely stopped. Days later, she was back under the lights, smiling, perfect. Inside, she was drowning. Postpartum depression hit her like a wave, but contracts didn't care. She had to keep up the image, the perfect wife, the golden couple. Years later, fate would echo. In 1982, Mia died in a crash on Mulholland Drive, thrown from the car through the sunroof. She was just 22, the same age Edie had been when she first met Ernie. Kovacs' creative streak kept pushing boundaries. On NBC in 1957, he delivered a nearly silent episode, just visuals and a few cigar ads. ABC executives had no idea what to do with him. He fought censors constantly, even threatening to pull entire shows. One walkout was so tense, the network started prepping to run a Western instead. The censorship wars frustrated him so much, he wrote a novel, Zumar, as a form of revenge. Back in 1952, Kovacs tried something new with Kovacs on the Corner, a show full of imaginary neighbors and swap segments. But he quickly lost creative control. Producers took over. The show, inspired by Fred Allen's radio sketches, became just another paycheck. The alcohol didn't help, nor did the gambling. He was charming, generous, but wrecked by demons. The motto he lived by was simple: nothing in moderation. Edie stood by, watching it all burn bright and fast. Their public life glowed. Their private life cracked. During peak TV years, Kovacs was co-starring in network shows, possibly even one pulling 15 million viewers. But the pressure behind the scenes was relentless. He drank more, gambled more. The debts piled up. Adams would later say she had no idea how bad it was until it nearly swallowed them. She kept performing, more sultry now, more knowing. The Muriel cigar ads came calling, and her training let her fake glamour through gritted teeth. She played the part to perfection. Her first album came in 1960 under Roulette Records. She had the training, voice, piano, performance, but the label wanted sex appeal. Her talent took a back seat to her figure. It didn't matter. Muriel paid more. The cigar ads became her legacy. "Why don't you pick one up and smoke it sometime?" she'd purr. They paid her $100,000 a year. For 20 years. The twist? She was allergic to cigar smoke. She held her breath in every take. They invented a ring holder so she wouldn't have to touch it. Behind the scenes, fans blew the smoke away. She'd pop antihistamines, fake the seduction, and cash the checks. By the end, she had earned $2 million from Muriel alone. After Kovacs died in a car crash on January 13, 1962, she was drowning in $500,000 of his debts. Just 2 months later, she showed up on set for It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Kovacs was supposed to be in it. She took his place, filmed through grief, and broke down between takes. The movie made $60 million, but she called it performing through tears. In Lover Come Back, 1961, she acted beside Rock Hudson. Off camera, the scenes were painful. Hudson, secretly gay, struggled with the romantic material. He'd freeze mid-scene, stammering, tense. Adams didn't understand it at first. Eventually, she did. The film earned her $75,000. It cost far more in emotional exhaustion. In the Oscar 1966, she played a cold-hearted agent. But the lines weren't fiction. After Kovacs' death, Hollywood sharks circled her debt like vultures. More than one asked for favors in return for roles or help. She said no, and they made sure she paid for it. Studio heads warned her, quietly, subtly, that refusals came with consequences. She took the role in the Oscar and poured it all into Trina Yale. The anger, the bitterness, the realism. The film bombed, but for her, it was personal truth. By the late 60s, she was headlining in Vegas. Audiences loved her. The casinos loved her even more. She signed deals for $25,000 a week, but after house fees and expenses, she saw closer to $15,000. It wasn't until 1967, when the FBI started digging, that she realized she was being skimmed by the mob. Venues like the Sands and Desert Inn were run by organized crime families. She lost an estimated $500,000 in skimmed wages. When she asked questions, they gave her smiles and warnings. At 1:30 in the morning, it was raining in a way Los Angeles rarely sees. Ernie Kovacs was driving his Chevrolet Corvair station wagon down Beverly Glen Boulevard after leaving Milton Berle's adoption party. Nobody knows exactly what happened in those final moments, but the road was slick, the curve was tight, and his hand was probably flicking a lighter, trying to get his cigar going. When he lost control, the car slammed into a wooden power pole with such violence that the entire left side crumpled inward. He was thrown halfway out the passenger door, dead on impact from chest and head injuries. The scene was brutal. An unlit cigar lay just inches from his outstretched hand. It was the kind of detail that sticks with you. By the time Harry Vaughn, the hospital attendant, got there, Ernie's body was jammed under the seat, his leg trapped. They had to pry him out. At home, Edie called the police, still unsure what had happened. She heard a man on the line cup his hand over the receiver and quietly ask, "It's Mrs. Kovacs. What should I tell her?" That was how she found out. Her husband was gone. He was just 42. The funeral wasn't even over when the IRS came knocking. Ernie had owed $520,000 in back taxes, the equivalent of over $5 million today. He'd always called taxes theft, and now the government was here to collect, with no concern for the fresh widow or the 3 daughters standing behind her. They raided the Beverly Hills home, took jewelry, furniture, anything of value. Edie stuffed cash into the walls, hoping to save enough to get by, but the government showed no mercy. They filed liens worth $250,000 and took what they could. Edie wasn't just grieving, she was being treated like a criminal. She later described the experience as watching strangers paw through the remnants of her life, item by item, while she stood there in shock. And then came Bet. Just a few months after Ernie's death, his ex-wife Bet Scott filed court papers demanding $500,000 from the estate and custody of the two daughters, Betty and Kippy. Edie had raised them since the early 50s. Betta had even kidnapped them once back in 1955. But now she wanted them back, and the money too. In court, she called Edie unfit, accused her of being reckless with finances, leaked stories about Ernie's gambling. But it was 12-year-old Kippy who ended it. She testified, called Edie Mommy, and referred to her biological mother as the other lady. The judge ruled in Edie's favor. She wept outside the courthouse. This is the way Ernie would have wanted it. But the cost wasn't just legal fees. It was reopening wounds that hadn't even started to heal. Hollywood tried to help. Sinatra, Burl, Lemon, Dean Martin, they planned a $100,000 benefit show. Milton Berle even offered her $50,000 in cash. But Edie said no to every single one of them. "I can take care of my own children," she said. Accepting charity would have embarrassed Ernie, she insisted. Time magazine covered it. People were stunned. But she meant it. She worked without rest. Movies, television, Las Vegas shows. Groucho Marx introduced her on stage in Vegas, saying, "There are some things Edie won't do, but nothing she can't do." She was grinding to survive and to pay back debts that weren't even hers. When Ernie was buried on January 18th at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, the church was packed with names that defined Hollywood. Sinatra, Lemon, Dean Martin, Buster Keaton, Charlton Heston, Groucho Marx, George Burns. But the paparazzi didn't care about respect. They'd already published graphic photos from the crash. Now they crowded the funeral, cameras flashing as Edie clutched her husband's ring. Even at the graveside, she wasn't allowed to mourn. The epitaph read, "Nothing in moderation. We all loved him." But the circus outside made it hard to believe anyone loved anything except the spectacle. After the dust settled, Edie still had $500,000 in tax debt, plus what Ernie owed to gamblers and ABC. She didn't slow down. Between 1962 and 1965, she took on over 20 film and TV roles. Call Me Buona with Bob Hope was just one. She worked 18-hour days, studied tax law at night, tried to understand the paperwork that had taken over her life. Once, on the Batman set, she collapsed from exhaustion. It didn't matter. She had to keep going. She hit the nightclub circuit. Vegas, Europe, smoky clubs where she earned $5,000 a week. Except none of it went to her. The IRS garnished almost everything. They took 70% of her voice acting checks, too, like the ones she got for Roger Ramjet, a cartoon she'd only taken to scrape together whatever she could. That left her with barely $200 a week. Word spread in the industry. She was Kovacs' broke widow. Some execs whispered that she was damaged goods. Old friends stopped calling. She kept fighting. She released an album in 1962, Edie Adams Sings, but the record label stalled royalties. She took them to court. Bill collectors knocked on her door. The lawyers cost more than the payouts, but she had no choice. She was in too deep. That's when she realized if she didn't understand money, it would destroy her. She took accounting classes, learned to negotiate with the IRS, studied the contracts. Bit by bit, she reorganized everything. And in the middle of that chaos, she found out the networks were dumping old tapes, destroying them. So she took $10,000, money she couldn't spare, and bought hundreds of Ernie's kinescopes. Everyone told her it was stupid. But years later, the Library of Congress preserved them. Her gamble had saved her husband's legacy. Then came her comeback. In 1967, she launched Edie Adams Cosmetics. It was war. She went door to door, cut prices 15% lower than Mary Kay, recruited their top sellers with better commissions. Mary Kay sued. Edie fought back. She used her fame from the Muriel cigar ads to legitimize the brand, even made personal calls to wealthy Beverly Hills women. The business exploded. It funded everything else. The same year, she opened the first cut-and-curl salon. By 1972, there were over 50 locations in California and Nevada. She'd invested the money meant for tax payments to open them. That gamble almost broke her. When recession hit, 12 salons went bankrupt at once. She borrowed $75,000 from comedian friends, mortgaged her house twice, used it all to cover payroll for more than 300 employees. Eventually, the business bounced back, but the stress nearly destroyed her. She didn't stop. Bought a 160-acre almond farm in Bakersfield, sold her mansion to pay for it, promoted almonds nationwide, did commercials for Sun Giant. But then came 3 years of drought. $200,000 gone. Workers laid off. Irrigation systems useless. In 1986, the farm foreclosed. She told the LA Times, "I bellied up last month. What happened is what's happening to farmers all over America." She still spun it into money, used her farm story to get $25,000 per commercial as Sun Giant's spokesperson. In 1981, she started Bonham Inc., a couture fashion line, sold pieces at Neiman Marcus, used old Broadway costumes as inspiration, funded the company by selling her $35,000 emerald necklace. Recession hit again. Fabric shortages delayed orders. She delivered clothes herself, sometimes sewing in the fitting rooms. Her Muriel cigar residuals, $18,000 every quarter, kept the company afloat just long enough. Then she shut it down and moved on. By 1989, after 27 years of non-stop hustle, her net worth had crossed $1.2 million. From $500,000 in IRS debt to millionaire. She'd appeared in over 500 TV shows, 15 movies, and hundreds of live performances. The Muriel ads alone made her $2.4 million across 2 decades. Cosmetics, salons, shows, it all added up. Every dollar accounted for, every debt paid. By the early 1980s, Edie Adams was supposed to be invisible. 60 years old, a widow, and decades removed from her glamorous heyday beside Ernie Kovacs, she knew how Hollywood treated women her age, like furniture in a room no one noticed anymore. So she started walking into auditions with fake names, no makeup, and an old handbag that made her look like a stranger. The trick worked. Casting directors who had shrugged off Edie Adams suddenly found themselves praising a mysterious older actress who could command a scene with quiet authority. Her comeback on shows like Murder, She Wrote, and later ER wasn't luck. It was a carefully plotted rebellion against an industry that wanted her to fade gracefully. She spent $15,000 on coaches and image consultants to rework everything from her speech cadence to her posture, all to prove that talent could outlive the expiration date Hollywood stamped on women. But the fight to stay visible came after she had already fought to stay alive. In 1975, the weight of Kovacs' $500,000 debt, over $2.7 million in today's money, finally crushed her. Alone in her Beverly Hills home, she swallowed 47 pills, a cocktail of Valium, Librium, and sleeping medication, then collapsed near the fireplace. 8 paramedics arrived after a neighbor heard her fall. For 4 hours, they worked to pull her back, pumping her stomach and restarting her heart twice. When she woke, she didn't tell anyone. Not her friends, not the press. The story stayed buried for decades. She was terrified people would think she was another tragic Hollywood addict. But it wasn't about drugs. It was about exhaustion. She had been working 18-hour days, doing commercials and talk show spots, paying off the IRS, surviving on 2 hours of sleep. Later, she would admit to a friend that when she passed out, she was holding Kovacs' suicide note, the one investigators never found. The paramedics who saved her became her secret circle, men she barely knew who would check in every few weeks, making sure she stayed alive. Then, in 1982, came the call no mother is built to survive. Her daughter, 22-year-old Mia Susan Kovacs, had been thrown through the sunroof of her car after it hit a dip and overturned on a quiet California road. It was a Saturday morning, exactly 20 years after Ernie's fatal crash, down to the hour. Edie was in Biloxi, judging the Miss USA contest, when the phone rang. By the time she landed back in Los Angeles, Mia was gone, dead 3 hours after the accident. Adams buried her between Ernie and his daughter Kippy at Forest Lawn, creating a small family plot she visited almost daily. She canceled a $2 million Las Vegas contract and disappeared from public life for nearly a decade. During those silent years, she quietly paid the rent and tuition of 12 young actresses who reminded her of Mia, never telling them who she was. It was her way of keeping her daughter's dream alive, even if her own had ended. When the end finally came in 2008, it carried its own cruel irony. Edie Adams died of lung cancer and pneumonia at 81 in a Los Angeles hospital. She had never smoked a cigarette in her life. Yet she'd spent years in smoky clubs and beside a husband who burned through 5 cigars a day. The same woman who sold Muriel cigars on television with a wink, "Why don't you pick one up and smoke it sometime?" was killed by the smoke she never touched. Her estate, worth between $1 and $5 million, went to her son, Josh Mills, who later discovered she had donated over $3 million to lung cancer research. For the last 18 months of her life, she kept her illness private, turning down chemotherapy because she couldn't bear to lose her hair, spending $200,000 on experimental treatments in Mexico instead. When she was finally laid to rest beside Ernie and Mia, her tombstone carried just 3 words: "The last laugh." It was exactly the ending she wanted.